Part 22. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 212. You were talking about that girl just now. Tang Ning looked at Zhongyi and said, her name is Tang Shui, Yao Yao has seen her before. Tang Yao Yao came close to Zhongyi's ear and whispered a few words. Zhongyi knew that Tang Ning had made up her mind about the Tang family's affairs, so she stopped asking. Although that girl Tang Shui is beautiful, she is your sister, so don't worry. After Tang Ning left, Tang Yao Yao thought about it, looked at Zhongyi and said, what you need to worry about is the other vixen. She is not a fuel-efficient lamp. Zhongyi looked at her and said, don't worry, my husband knows what's appropriate. Tang Yao Yao rolled his eyes at her, don't worry, it has nothing to do with me whether he knows what's appropriate. Tang Ning walked into the yard and saw Xiao Xiao sitting in a daze on the stone bench in the yard. The old beggar was standing next to her, walking around, marveling. Seeing Tang Ning come in, he turned to look at Tang Ning and said, where did you pick up such a good young talent? If you don't learn martial arts, you will be wasting your resources. Tang Ning asked in surprise, what? The old beggar looked her up and down and said, she may be a little thinner, but her aptitude is excellent. If she is trained well, she will definitely become a first-class expert in time. When Xiao Xiao was looked at like this, he hid behind Tang Ning in fear. A first-rate master, Tang Ning looked at the old beggar, her eyes shining, and asked, what do you think of my qualifications? Can I become a first-rate master? It's enough for you to eat soft food. Why do you want to become a first-class master? The old beggar glanced at him and said, your little friend's martial arts are pretty good, so it's enough to protect you. Little, but, what does their high martial arts have to do with me? You need to be strong to make iron. Now he can climb over the wall, and getting married is just around the corner. Although his qualifications are a bit lacking, hard work can make up for his shortcomings. He has confidence in himself. The old beggar ignored Tang Ning, walked around behind him, looked at Xiao Xiao, and said in a seductive voice, little girl, do you want to learn martial arts from me and become a first-class master? Xiao Xiao grabbed Tang Ning's clothes and looked at him with some fear. The old beggar finally realized that Tang Ning was her backbone. He looked up at Tang Ning and said, boy, I have never had any apprentices in my life. I don't want to take this kung fu to the grave and ruin the inheritance. If you hand her over to me, I will be able to make her stand at the pinnacle of this martial arts world within a few years. Tang Ning glanced at him, wasn't the old guy very powerful? In the end, wouldn't he have to beg for his disciples? He does not object to the old beggar taking young people as his disciples. He has not seen clearly the strength of the old beggar yet. If he can get his full teaching, the journey of martial arts will be smooth. This is the same as when he is happy on weekdays. Pointing at Peng Chen is different. However, this matter still depends on whether Xiao Xiao is willing to do it. He looked down at Xiao Xiao and asked, are you willing to learn martial arts from this old man? Xiao Xiao looked at the old beggar with a confused expression. First-class master was still a very unfamiliar term to her. The old beggar said with a smile on his face, if you learn martial arts from me, you will become very powerful in the future. No one can bully you anymore. Whoever bullies you, you will beat them. She seemed to have thought of something. She grabbed Tang Ning's clothes harder and whispered, yes. The old beggar laughed loudly and said, now you kowtow 3 times to the old man, and you will be my good disciple from now on. Xiao Xiao knelt on the ground and kowtowed 3 times to the old beggar. Tang Ning felt a little distressed and helped her wipe the dust off her forehead. The old beggar touched her head and said with a smile, good disciple. He stretched out his hand to Tang Ning and said, give me some money. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, what do you want the money for? The old beggar said angrily, of course I am buying some medicinal materials for my good disciple. Look at how frail she is. Before learning kung fu from me, You must first improve her physique. His idea coincided with Tang Ning's. Xiao Xiao couldn't fill her stomach for a long time, was malnourished, was extremely thin, and had poor immunity. Tang Ning was worried that with her current physique, even a minor illness would be very dangerous. The most important thing was to improve her physical fitness first. Come up. The old beggar knows all kinds of things. He is a virgin eye recognition machine and a kidney tonifying consultant. It should be a trivial matter for him to regulate the body. He looked at the old beggar and asked, "How much does it cost?" The old beggar thought for a moment and said, "Let me give you 10,000 taels first." I didn't expect that this old guy was even darker than me. He only spent 10,000 taels on eating century-old wild ginseng every day. Do you really think he didn't understand the market? 10,000 taels are not available. Is 100 taels enough? 100 taels, the old beggar thought for a while, waved his hand and said, "Forget it, her body is still too weak and can't bear the strong medicine, so just buy some ordinary goods first. 100 taels is enough, but this 100 taels can last for a month at most. If you are good to my good disciple, make money quickly. There will be more places to spend money in the future." According to the old beggar, the more money he spent in the future, the more money he would spend. Tang Ning knew that she had to hurry up and make money without him reminding her. Of course, making money is inseparable from Tang Yao Yao. The Tang family has connections and resources in the capital, and Tang Yao Yao has the luck to win every bet. She is Tang Ning's cash cow. Tang Ning suddenly didn't want her to leave the capital. They also have a winemaking business in Lingzhou. By the end of this year, the first batch of new wine will be available. Although the taste will definitely not reach the level of wine aged for 10 or dozens of years, it will be far better than ordinary wines on the market in terms of strength and mellowness. As for the capital, he thought about it and decided to enter the publishing industry first. The address of the bookstore has been chosen. Miss Tang bought several small bookstores adjacent to each other on the bookstore street and merged them into one store. From then on, Tang Grenzai is the largest bookstore in the capital. Tang Yao Yao rejected the suggestion of taking one character from each of their names and finally decided to name the bookstore Tang Grenzai. This name was chosen because the two behind-the-scenes bosses of the bookstore are both surnamed Tang. You can't write two Tangs with one stroke. They love each other like a family, and the bookstore can develop stably and harmoniously. The assistants and craftsmen of those small bookstores were also bought by her. When Tang Ning writes the manuscript, she can start printing and selling it. It was originally a very troublesome thing to open a shop in the capital and recruit assistants and craftsmen, but Miss Tang spent a lot of money and got everything done within a few days. With the precedents of the Romance of the West Chamber and the Peony Pavilion, Tang Ning planned to launch the Peach Blossom Fan and the Palace of Eternal Life. 2 of the 4 famous classical dramas were sold like crazy, so there was no reason why the other 2 could not sell well. In order to complete the thesis, I watched these classical dramas and got a headache. I thought I would never use them after graduation, but I didn't expect that they would come in handy at this time. Ching ran in from outside and said in a panic, "Son-in-law, someone is looking for you outside again. There are so many people here this time." When Tang Ning walked out of the county government office, he saw 2 carriages parked at the gate of the county government office. A man who looked like a butler was directing several people to move the boxes off the carriages. "Be careful, don't bump into anything. Move in quickly." Tang Ning walked over and asked in confusion, "What's this for?" The man looked at him and clasped his fists and said, "Is it the number 1 scholar?" Tang Ning nodded. The housekeeper smiled and said, "This is some small gifts from His Royal Highness Prince Kong to the number 1 scholar. Please don't refuse it." From the thickness and number of the boxes, the gifts were not small. But compared with what Prince Kong got, these were nothing. In the case of the Black Tiger Gang, he not only severely damaged Prince Duan's spirit, but also pulled down a minister of the Ministry of Revenue who belonged to the Tang family and Prince Duan's party. These gains could not be obtained by sending a few boxes of gold and silver. He was short of money, so how could he not accept the gift that was sent to his door? What's more, accepting the gift from Prince Kong was just a signal, and this signal was what he was willing to convey. Tang Ning smiled and bowed to the housekeeper, saying, "Thank His Royal Highness Prince Kong for me." Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 213. Xiaoju walked in from outside and saw the boxes Tang Ning placed in the yard. He asked, "Are these also sent by King Kong?" Tang Ning nodded. He had just opened these boxes and looked at them. Although there was no real gold or silver inside, there were many valuable objects and calligraphy and paintings. In terms of value, the boxes filled with silver were much larger. 3 inches of human world. He planned to pick out some useful things from them and sell all the other messy things. In comparison, it was more reassuring to hold the silver bills in his hands. Prince Kong is really willing to give this time. Xiaoju clapped his hands and said, "More was sent to you than to the Xiao family, but it's no wonder. Even if he gave these things to others, he couldn't get Prince Duan a minister of the Ministry of Revenue." He sat opposite Tang Ning and asked, "Have you thought about it? Will you stand on the side of Prince Kong in the future?" Tang Ning handed him the teapot and asked, "Are you standing on the side of Prince Huai?" "That's right." Xiaoju poured himself a cup of tea and said, "You and the Tang family are irreconcilable, which means you are irreconcilable with Prince Duan. Prince Huai is just a salted fish in the background, so you can only choose Prince Kong." In fact, Tang Ning currently does not have the problem of whether to choose or not. What he can't do, Prince Kong can do. What Prince Kong wants to do, he needs a reason. He gives Prince Kong a reason, and Prince Kong helps him do it. They just get what they need. As for standing, he doesn't need to consider it now. Xiaoju stopped talking about this matter and asked, "Hey, you will be appointed in 3 months. What are your plans during this time?" "What plans?" Xiaoju shook his head and said, "These are the last 3 months of free time. After taking up the post, you won't be as free as you are now. Why don't you take advantage of this time to relax?" Tang Ning thought for a while and said, "I plan to get married next month. Do you want to come to the banquet?" "Get married?" Xiaoju was startled and asked, "You have been married before, how many will you marry this time?" Tang Ning held up 2 fingers. "2? Don't you already have 2? Xiaoju's eyes widened and asked, "Who will you marry this time?" "Miss Tang must be one. Who is the other one? Miss Li, could it be Miss Su?" Tang Yao Yao poked her head out from outside the yard. "Who called me?" "You are talking about the other Miss Tang." Tang Ning waved at her, and Tang Yao Yao's head shrank back again. "Another Miss Tang." Xiaoju spat out a mouthful of tea, stood up from the stool, and said in shock, "Are you talking about Miss Tang Shui? She is your sister." After he finished speaking, he patted his head again. "No, I forgot, she is just your cousin, not your biological sister." "Neither." Tang Ning gave him a displeased look. "Xiaoju, although his body is as pure as a little white flower, his heart is as dirty as mud." After listening to Tang Ning's explanation, he suddenly realized what was going on. He then looked at him and said, "A man who married twice is worthy of being the top scholar. He really knows how to have fun." Tang Ning glanced at him and asked, "You are already 18 years old. If you don't get married now, when will you wait?" Xiaoju straightened his chest and said, "I just can't stand those mediocre women." Tang Ning thought for a moment and said, "I heard that Mr. Xiao asked matchmakers to visit many high-ranking families in the capital, but no one agreed to marry the Xiao family. Is it because of you?" "Nonsense." Tang Ning was interrupted by Xiaoju before he finished his sentence. He slapped the stone table and said, "Those are just rumors. Let me tell you, I went to a brothel a few days ago. You called 10 girls to feed the mosquitoes. Xiaoju looked at him and said, you and I are no longer the same. You can't fool me. Tang Ning looked at him and smiled, the old senior has taught me his way of judging people. You are still you, we are the same. Xiaoju sneered and said, you are married, and you still have the nerve to say that you are the same as me. Tang Ning smiled and said, Ma is different. The old beggar is really knowledgeable and omnipotent. He can actually see such things through facial features. To a certain extent, he was not just talking nonsense when he was fortune-telling on the street before. He also said that he had a peach blossom disaster. Tang Ning has been waiting for a long time, but he hasn't waited until now. Xiao Ru and Xiao Yi will be welcomed into the house in early June. Now the house has been completed. Because it is a renovation, not a new one, there is no formaldehyde exceeding the standard in this era. 2 days are left for cleaning, and Ma can move in. Before that, he still needs to sleep in Hongxiu Pavilion for 2 more days. He pushed the door open and walked in. Su Mei was sitting barefoot beside the bed, her legs swinging irregularly. Why did you come just now? When she saw Tang Ning, she perked up and said, come here, let's play 2 games, then go to bed. Su Mei was now an expert at playing cards. It was not easy for Tang Ning to beat her. After playing 5 games, he lost 3 games and had 3 pieces of white paper on his face, while Su Mei only had 2. Okay, I lose today. It's getting late, so go to bed early. Tang Ning rolled up a mat and spread it on the floor. If he changed rooms, Manager Su and the others might be suspicious, so he decided to make do with the floor for the night. What do you mean you lose? It was you who lost. Su Mei lay on the bed, looked at him, and said, the floor is so cold, you should sleep on the bed. This bed is so big, it can sleep 2 people. The bed was quite big, but he fell asleep that night and he didn't know that Su Fox had crawled over. When he was awake, it had a different meaning. Tang Ning lay on the mat, closed her eyes, and said, no, I like to sleep on the floor. Su Mei was silent for a moment, and suddenly asked, do you think I am shameless? Tang Ning put her hands behind her head and said, don't think I can't see that you are still a virgin. Don't pretend to be experienced. Su Mei sat up from the bed, put her hands on her chest, and asked in surprise, how did you see that? Tang Ning opened her eyes and said lightly, do you think you can see that? Su Mei glanced at him and said, no, no, then you should sleep closer, sleep next to the bed. Tang Ning turned over and lay down next to the bed. She looked up at Su Mei and said, do you know that your face looks very big from here? Go to hell. Su Mei shrank back into the bed, and Tang Ning could no longer see her. Tang Ning thought for a moment and said, oh, I forgot to tell you something. I'm getting married on the 9th day of next month. The 9th day of the 6th month, a surprised voice came from the bed, didn't you get married before? Again, do you want to come over for a drink? Are you sure you want me to go? Su Mei's tone was a little teasing. Tang Ning thought about it. If Suhuli went, she would steal all his limelight. But he didn't have many friends in the capital, so it would be wrong not to invite her. He thought about it carefully and said, why don't you cover your face when you go that day? Su Mei yawned, we'll talk about it later. Tang Ning closed his eyes and said, there's one more thing. I won't rest here for another 2 nights. Why? Su Mei's voice instantly lost her sleepiness. I bought a house in the capital and will move in 2 days. No one will fight for your bed anymore. Su Mei did not answer this time. She flicked her finger and the candle on the table went out. She covered herself with the quilt and said, go to sleep. She lay on the bed, tossing and turning. She thought that lying on this bed would cure her insomnia without medicine. Now it seems that the reason why she can sleep peacefully here is not because of this bed. She gritted her teeth and felt ashamed. Did this guy give her some kind of magic potion? Why can she sleep peacefully and comfortably when he is there? If this is the case, what should she do in the future? She shook her head vigorously to get rid of some strange thoughts from her mind, and then leaned towards the bed, closer to the comfortable breath. Early in the morning, Tang Ning walked into the room. Su Are You, who was helping him put his clothes together, glanced at him, walked over, and asked with concern, "Brother Xiaoning, what's wrong with your forehead?" Tang Ning covered the small bruise on his forehead, smiled awkwardly, and said, "I accidentally fell off the bed last night, it's nothing." In fact, it was Su Mei who fell off the bed last night. He actually forgot that she was not honest when sleeping. If he had known, he would have rolled up the mat and slept at the door, and he would not have been hit like this by her. In Tianrunju, Xiao Tao walked over quickly, looked at Su Mei, and hurriedly said, "Miss, what's wrong with you? Are you hurt? I'll go get you some medicine." Su Mei rubbed her forehead, and thought of the scene this morning, and her face flushed with shame. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 214. Brother Xiaoning, don't move. Just be patient. Xiru was carefully applying medicine to him. Xiao Xiao was watching obediently and handed him a hot bun. This silly girl just likes to eat buns. Tang Ning had to find an opportunity to teach her a lesson. Don't let anyone cheat her with a cabbage bun in the future. Xiao Xiao didn't eat with them now. The old beggar personally made a diet for her, saying that her body was too weak and she needed to take good care of herself first. Although the old guy was unreliable most of the time, he was still very responsible for his beloved disciple, so Tang Ning listened to his arrangements. The ointment was cool when applied, and the pain was immediately reduced. He was still having a beautiful dream in the morning, dreaming of the wedding night, and suddenly there were several brides in the new house, and was woken up by Su Mei's ruthless smash. Su Huli was different from Tang Yao Yao. Although she was far from being fat, she was not as slim as Tang Yajing. She had the right curves on her body. She was the plump type that men loved the most. Although the bed was not high, it was still hard to fall down with a body weighing nearly 100 kilograms. Reality was cruel. There were no erotic accidents in the morning, and there was no mouth-to-mouth sex. What made Tang Ning a little worried was that he was injured in another place besides his forehead. After all, as a real man, his body would always undergo some changes in the early morning. Of course, any changes were restored to their original state by Su Mei's hit. Su Aryu looked at the painful expression on his face and asked with concern, "Brother Xiaoning, does it still hurt?" It's okay, Tang Ning shook her head. They were about to get married. If Su Huli hit her and something went wrong, she would be guilty. After Xiru and Xiao Xiao went out, he closed the door and planned to try the old beggar's double cultivation secrets. Outside the door, the old beggar ran out of the kitchen holding a bowl, smiling and saying, "Good disciple, come and drink this bowl of medicinal food." "Thank you, master." Xiao Xiao picked up the bowl, sat at the stone table in the yard, and sipped the porridge. A sturdy figure ran in from outside the yard, and when he ran across the yard, his footsteps suddenly stopped and turned back. Zhao Yuan sniffed, stared at the bowl, swallowed his saliva, walked over, looked at Xiao Xiao, licked his lips, and said, "Little sister, your bowl is so beautiful." Tang Ning opened the door. After the verification just now, he finally put his mind at ease. He didn't need to settle this account with Su Huli for the time being. When he walked out of the room, he saw King Run standing next to Xiao Xiao. Prince Run took out a lot of things from his arms, put them on the stone table, and said, "Little sister, give me a sip, and I will give you all these things." Tang Ning looked at the things on the table. There were dried fruits and candied fruits, glass beads, a delicate little slingshot, and half of the cakes he had left. Xiao Xiao sat a little further away from him. If Tang Ning hadn't introduced her, she would not talk to a stranger. Tang Ning walked over and said, "Your Highness Prince Run, you can't eat this." "Why?" Prince Run pointed at Xiao Xiao and said unconvincedly, "Why can this sister eat it, but I can't?" The reason why Prince Run couldn't eat it was because this was a medicinal diet tailored by the old beggar for Xiao Xiao, which was used to improve her physique and let her grow well. Prince Run's body couldn't grow any longer, and if it grew any more, there would be problems. By then, he would be damaged, and the emperor asked him for a son. What would he do? However, Tang Ning believed that if he explained it this way, Prince Run would definitely not understand. So he leaned close to his ear and whispered, "This porridge is for girls. Boys will have their penises shrink after drinking it." Prince Run asked in confusion, "What is a penis?" Tang Ning pointed it out for him. Prince Run's face turned pale, and he covered his crotch with both hands and said, "Then I won't drink it. After drinking the porridge, I can't marry the sister of the Wang family." Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Who is the sister of the Wang family?" When it came to this topic, Prince Run's eyes lit up and he said, "The sister of the Wang family is the sister of the Wang family. I like her. I will marry her as my princess in the future." The 11-year-old kid didn't know what love meant. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "What do you like about the sister of the Wang family?" "I like her good looks, I like the sound of her voice, I like the way she smiles, and I also like the fact that she wore a skirt embroidered with lotus flowers that day." Tang Ning stared at him in a daze, and took back his previous evaluation of the fat boy in his heart. Zhao Yuan suddenly looked at him and said, "By the way, I told my father that I want you to be my teacher." "What?" Tang Ning was stunned and asked, "Did your father agree?" "Yes, why didn't father agree?" Zhao Yuan looked at him happily and said, "My father said you are very capable and asked me to learn more from you. Then I can leave the palace at will in the future. The princes have many teachers, including several university scholars and officials of the Hanlin Academy, who will give them lectures. It stands to reason that he may encounter such an assignment after taking office." The teacher that Prince Run mentioned must mean learning to cook with him, but Tang Ning is not sure what Emperor Chen means. It doesn't matter if he doesn't know. If he wants to eat for free, then he can eat for free. There are so many people in the family, one more mouth for him is not much, and one less mouth for him is not much. Zhao Yuan went to the corner to play with glass beads alone, and he would probably play until dinner. Tang Ning walked to another room. Xiru was not there, only Xiaoi was in the room. She sat on the bed, with a wedding dress spread out on the bed. Seeing Tang Ning come in, she looked a little flustered and wanted to put the wedding dress away. Tang Ning walked over quickly and said, "You'll have to wear it next month anyway, why don't you put it on now and let me see it?" Although the two have been married for almost a year, Tang Ning has never seen her in a wedding dress. Zhonyi blushed and said shyly, "Husband, you can't wear a wedding dress in advance, it's unlucky." "Then forget it." Tang Ning sat on the bed, holding her hand, and smiled, "You'll see it sooner or later, so there's no need to rush." She leaned on Tang Ning's chest and murmured, "Time flies so fast. At this time last year, I didn't even know my husband." Tang Ning also sighed a little. On this day last year, he was still a single dog in another world. In a year, he went through the state exam, provincial exam, palace exam, and became the top scorer in the imperial examination in this strange world. He also had a beautiful wife in his arms. Thinking about it, he even felt like he was dreaming. "Husband," a voice suddenly came from his arms. "I want to ask you a question." "Go ahead." Zhonyi thought for a moment and asked, "Does my husband really like me?" "Yes," Tang Ning said without hesitation. "Then what does my husband like about me?" Tang Ning thought for a moment, looked down at her, and said, I like your good looks, I like the sound of your voice, I like the way you smile, and I also like the dress you wore with lotus embroidered on it that day. After he finished speaking, he felt the delicate body in his arms tremble. He lowered his head and saw a layer of mist in the pair of clear eyes. My husband Zhongyi hugged him tightly and said, "Thank you." Tang Ning put his arm around her shoulders and secretly decided that he would treat Prince Run to steamed lamb, steamed bear paws, steamed deer tails, roast duck, roast chicken, roast goose. Just then, Zhongyi looked up at him and whispered, "But my husband, I don't have a skirt embroidered with lotus flowers." At the door of the room, Tang Yao Yao looked down at the edge of her skirt embroidered with lotus flowers, her face flushed, and she secretly said, "Shameless." Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 215. There must be a teacher for 3 people, but there must be a teacher for 2 people. The emperor asked Tang Ning to be the teacher of King Run, and Tang Ning also had something to learn from King Run. It was a bit embarrassing to say that he had to learn how to pick up girls from an 11-year-old child, but it was true that this kid's tricks were so effective. Just now, he had given his first kiss, the kind with tongue sticking out. In this way, even if Su Mei fell off the bed next time or had a car accident, he would not have to worry about losing this precious thing. After being intimate with Xiaoai in the room for a while, he walked out of the room. King Run was still sticking his butt on the ground playing with glass beads. The old beggar was teaching Xiao Xiao some simple moves. She just followed the movements. Although they were not powerful, they looked good. Tang Yao Yao was different. That was real practice. The sword energy was whistling, and the posture was graceful. She looked like a real female hero. Tang Ning came out, she put away her sword, glanced at him, and whispered, "Shameless." Although she spoke softly, Tang Ning still heard it. He reflected on himself and realized that he had definitely not offended her in the past 2 days. However, women have a few days every month when they get angry for no reason. At this time, even if she is being petty for no reason, it can be forgiven. Tang Ning looked at her and said, "The dress you are wearing today is very beautiful." Women always need to be praised. Tang Yejing is the kind of person who is honest but honest. When she is praised, although she looks indifferent on the surface, she will be happy in her heart. Tang Yao Yao looked down, her face turned red, she glanced at him, and snorted coldly, "Shameless." Even Xiao Ai would be upset at such a special time. Tang Yao Yao's symptoms might be more serious. She was still like this when he praised her. Tang Ning was too lazy to pay attention to her, so he let her be alone. "Mr. Tang, is Mrs. Hongai here?" Tang Ning walked out of the yard, and a young woman came towards him and asked him. "It's Miss Zhao. Xiao Ai is in the room. Just go find her." The young woman is the daughter of Ping'an County Magistrate. She would come over occasionally. Tang Ning had met her several times. "Okay, thank you, Mr. Tang." The young woman nodded, but did not go in. Instead, she stood there and looked at Tang Ning with a strange look. Tang Ning looked at her and asked in confusion, "Miss Zhao, is there something on my face?" The young woman smiled and said, "Mr. Tang's face really has something." Tang Ning returned to the room and looked in the mirror. He found that there were several red lip marks on his face. They must have been left by Xiao Ai just now. He couldn't help but blush. He actually walked around the yard for so long with these lip marks. No wonder Tang Yejing said he was shameless. After washing his face carefully, he came out, said hello to the old beggar, and took Xiao Xiao out of the county government office. There was a notice posted at the entrance of the county government office. After the Black Tiger Gang case, those children were rescued, but they were homeless. The court temporarily placed them in Fuxianyuan and issued notices to various places, hoping that the families of these children would see it and take them back. The probability of this is pitifully small. Even in the future, When information is extremely developed, countless parents want to find their lost children. It is extremely difficult, not to mention now. How can we find their parents with just a few portraits that don't look like them? Fuxianyuan is a charity established by the court, similar to the welfare homes and orphanages in the future, but for real orphans, it is not a good place. Entering there can only save lives and not freeze to death or starve to death. After leaving, Xiao Xiao held Tang Ning's hand tightly. She was full of vigilance and fear of the outside world. Although Tang Ning wanted to protect her, she didn't want her to stay at home forever. Only by letting her slowly get out of those psychological shadows can she have better physical and mental development. Walking from the county government office to the house, Tang Ning bought her a sugar man and a small windmill. She just held these two things in her hands. If Tang Ning guessed correctly, she would take these two things back and hide them. Xiao Xiao had the habit of hiding things, especially food. She would carefully wrap up and hide the leftover buns, cakes, and candied fruits, and eat them next time. Tang Ning could often find these things in the room. The hairpins and jade bracelets that Tang Ning gave her were all hidden by her. He took the sugar man from her hand, put it to her mouth, and said, "Eat it. As long as I am here, you will not be hungry." Xiao Xiao will not have to hide things anymore. She stared at Tang Ning in a daze, took a small bite, and then put the other side of the sugar man to Tang Ning's mouth. Tang Ning took a bite, held her hand, and smiled, let's go see our new house." Tang Ning thought that the house would take 2 days to be completed, but she didn't expect that it could be delivered today. The renovated house looked brand new and was much more spacious than the small courtyard of the county government office. The indoor swimming pool, the bathing pool, and the spacious martial arts training ground were all built according to his requirements. In the hot summer, he would swim a few laps. After practicing martial arts, he would take a comfortable hot bath. Then he would send Xing'er out and ask 2 little maids to massage his back and shoulders. It was a great enjoyment in life. Taking Xiao Xiao for a walk around the house, Tang Ning couldn't help but sigh, it's great to have money. The construction period was a little shorter than he expected. In fact, he could move in today. Tang Ning thought about it and decided to move tomorrow. Tonight, let's say our final goodbyes to Suhuhu, and we no longer have to worry about being woken up by her rolling out of bed in the morning. When Xiao Xiao fell asleep and left the county government office and came to Hungzhou Pavilion, Su Mei was already sitting on the bed. She looked at Tang Ning and asked worriedly, "Are you okay?" When she asked, Tang Ning felt a dull pain in a certain part of her body. She shook her head and said, "It's okay." "Is it really okay?" "It's okay. It's okay." Su Mei finally felt relieved. Although she had not yet experienced anyone, she also knew how important that place was to men. Tang Ning took his mat and spread it on the ground, far away from the bed, and then said, "I will move into a new house tomorrow. I will lock this room from the outside. When you sleep at night, remember not to making too much noise." Su Mei sighed and said, "One night of marriage and 100 days of kindness, we have slept for so many days, are you willing to leave like this?" Tang Ning thought for a while and asked, "How about I leave a bed for you in my house?" "Really?" Su Mei looked surprised. "Fake," Tang Ning said angrily. "I've only heard of people keeping vixens outside their homes, but I've never heard of anyone keeping vixens at home." Su Mei was a little disappointed. She lay on the bed and said, "It's the last night. You can sleep closer. If you stay closer, I will sleep soundly." Tang Ning couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong with you?" "I still want to ask you," Su Mei said angrily, "what kind of incense did you give me?" "Cause and effect cycle, this may be retribution." Su Hyugzu was so good at charming that she had all the men in the capital so fascinated that they all fell under her pomegranate skirt. The reincarnation of heaven and the unsatisfactory retribution made her prostrate herself on his bed. Sumei lay on the bed and gritted her teeth. If I can't sleep after you leave, I will tie you up and make you sleep with me every day. Dream on, you'd better not think too much about me, I'm destined to be the man you can't have. Why are you so shameless? You took over my bed and called me shameless. You can sleep up here, I'm not stopping you. Tang Ning leaned towards the bed and said, seriously, you are sick. I know a few imperial doctors. Do you want them to take a look at it for you? Sumei said with some disappointment, I have seen many miracle doctors, but they are all useless. Actually, I am also a miracle doctor. I have a senior brother who is better than me. If I have a chance, I will ask him to help you. You are not a miracle doctor. Sumei moved to the bedside, felt the familiar breath, and whispered, you are my medicine. Tang Ning slept soundly this time. Sumei's body smelled very good and helped her sleep to a certain extent. He seemed to have been talking to her yesterday and fell asleep without knowing why. He opened his eyes and saw Sumei lying beside the bed, looking intently at a certain part of his body. Tang Ning woke up instantly, rolled over, and got up from the ground. She covered her important parts with her hands and asked in shock, what do you want to do? Sumei breathed a long sigh of relief and murmured, it turns out it's really okay. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 216. This was the last night in Hongxiu Pavilion. Tang Ning rarely stayed in bed with Sumei for a while longer, and then left the room with her. Of course, he went through the door, and Sumei still went through the window. Goodbye, young master. Several girls stood at the door and waved to him, looking reluctant, attracting passers-by to stop and watch. Zhongyi said with some confusion, why did you come back so late today, my husband? The food is cold. I'll go and heat it up for you. I slept a little longer this morning. Tang Ning walked to the table and said, don't bother, it's not too cold, just eat it like this. Zhongyi tested the temperature of the food and found that it was not very cold. She sat down opposite Tang Ning and said, my husband, Princess Anyang invited me. I will go there with Miss Zhao tomorrow and come back later. Princess Anyang has a wide network of contacts in the capital, and often holds various banquets with famous names, inviting prominent figures in the capital. Even Tang Ning participated in it once, and had a very unpleasant quarrel with Lu Tang. Having a father who is the magistrate of Ping'an County means that she has entered the circle of famous ladies in the capital. It is necessary to make more friends. When she was in Lingzhou, she was the most talented woman. She had many social occasions on weekdays, so she should be able to easily handle such a situation. Tang Ning thought for a while and asked, where is the party place? Tianrunju. Zhongyi smiled and said, the guest is in Tianrunju, and it is a guest from heaven. I have heard of the name of Tianrunju before I came to the capital. The last time I went there was at night, so I didn't see the interior of the garden. This time I have to take a good look. Although he believed in Xiaoi, all circles in the capital were not peaceful, especially between women. When more than 3 women were together, intrigues were inevitable. Tang Ning was still a little worried about her. He wanted to let Tang Yaoyao go with him, but Princess Anyang didn't invite her, so it was not good to come uninvited. After thinking about it, he decided to tell Sumei and let her help take care of it when the time comes. Su Fox is a smart person. She can handle ordinary occasions. However, Xiaoi told him this a little late, otherwise he could have told Sumei yesterday. Now he has to go to Tianrunju in person. Tang Yaoyao walked in from outside and asked, have you finished writing your book? Tang Ning looked at her and asked, what book? Tang Yaoyao frowned, didn't you say that you would write a volume in the evening and let them take it to print first? Tang Ning then remembered that he forgot to write the manuscript when he was chatting with Sumei last night. He looked at Tang Yaoyao and said, it's already written. I'll check it again and give it to you in the afternoon. Tang Yaoyao looked at him and suddenly asked, You haven't written it yet, have you? How is it possible? Tang Ning frowned and looked at her, saying, what kind of friendship do we have? You don't believe me. How about I take it out now and let you see it? Tang Yao Yao nodded and said, okay. Tang Ning sat at the table writing the manuscript, and Tang Yao Yao sat opposite him and stared at him. Tang Ning was very disappointed with her behavior. As a good friend and business partner, she didn't even give him the most basic trust. This made him hesitate in his heart. If there is any profitable business in the future, should he look for her? After knowing each other for such a long time, Tang Yao Yao's trust in him is not as good as Su-mei, who has only known him for a few months. Suhuli dared to sleep in the same bed with him late at night. What kind of trust is this? Tang Yao Yao knocked on the table and said loudly, why are you daydreaming? Write quickly. Tang Ning sighed, dipped his pen in ink, and began to write. In the love field of the past and present, who can ask who is sincere? But if there is sincerity, they will eventually become a couple. There is no need to worry about the south and the north, and the two hearts will discuss life and death. Laugh at the children of the world who are sad about the fate of stinginess and heartlessness. Feel the gold and stone, return to heaven and earth. It took Tang Ning half an hour to finish the first volume of The Palace of Eternal Life. He rubbed his sore wrists and put down the pen, and found that Tang Yao Yao fell asleep on the table. She was sleeping soundly with her hands on the table, lying on her side, with a faint glimmer at the corner of her mouth. Tang Ning picked up the pen and resisted the urge to draw a turtle on her face after a while. Relying on his martial arts skills, he actually forced her to write an article. If he was not worried that she would wake up and beat him up, he would have drawn this turtle. He didn't dare to draw the turtle, but he could take revenge by pulling her face while she was asleep. After all, such opportunities don't come often. Tang Ning looked around to make sure no one would come in, and stretched out his hand to pinch her cheek and pull it, and Tang Yao Yao's eyes suddenly opened. It only took a moment for her eyes to go from confused to clear. Tang Ning's expression remained unchanged and he said, I've finished writing. I was just about to call you, but you woke up. Tang Yao Yao sat up straight, looked at him and asked, what did you want to do just now? Call you to wake up, what else can I do? Tang Ning handed her the first volume and said, by the way, you have to ask them to print this volume quickly, as many as they can. Tang Yao Yao rubbed her eyes and sat up, asking, why? Tang Ning glanced at her and said, you're stupid. If you print less, others won't be able to buy it. When those pirated copies come out, customers will all buy theirs. How can we make money? He had already thought about the issue of piracy before he was ready to open a bookstore. Chen State has no copyright protection law, so piracy is inevitable. Selling in volumes, before they pirate, one volume every few days can maximize profits. Naturally, the more copies of each volume, the better. After the piracy period, you can no longer make a lot of money. Having sales experience in the Romance of the West Chamber and the Peony Pavilion, Tang Ning can probably judge a more accurate supply and demand figure. The best way is of course to license it to those pirates, but in this era there is no copyright protection, and only fools will use money to buy things that can be obtained for free. What? Tang Yao Yao finally woke up, slapped the table, and said angrily, whoever dares to pirate our books, I will smash their store. Calm down, calm down. Tang Ning stood up, patted her shoulder, and said, violence won't solve the problem. If you smash up their store, they will still pirate copies, unless. Unless what? Forget it. Tang Ning waved her hand. There were examples of copyright protection in ancient times, but he didn't have the strength and didn't want to take the risk. There are so many pirated booksellers in the capital, and trying to get profits from them is tantamount to snatching food from the mouth of a tiger, unless you are also a tiger yourself, or there is a tiger willing to help you. Tang Ning was not a tiger herself, nor had she met another tiger. Qing ran in from outside, put something on the table, and said, "Uncle, there is an invitation." "Who sent the invitation?" Qing shook her head and said, "I don't know. The yamen servant at the door sent it to me. I will know when I open it and take a look." Tang Ning opened the invitation, and after a moment, she whispered, "Tomorrow afternoon, at Tianrunju, will King Kong invite you to a banquet?" Xiaoju walked in from outside and asked, "Prince Kong has invited you too, are you going?" Go Tang Ning nodded and said, "Why not go? Although he and King Kong are not in the same boat, they are on the same front. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. They have the same goal, and it is normal for them to move around each other." He looked at Xiaoju again and said, "You came just in time, call all your people and help me move." Tang Ning actually didn't have much to move, just a few big boxes. The house was repaired, but he hadn't had time to hire maids and servants. Xiao I would not move there for the time being. The third uncle and the third aunt bought a small house nearby, and Zaira moved in with them. Therefore, after getting married before, there were only Tang Ning, Xiao Xiao, and the old beggar in the huge house. He was very relieved that master was here, so he didn't need to hire any nursing home. It was late at night, and Tang Ning was lying on the big bed in her new house, sleeping soundly. At the same time, in a room on the second floor of Hongxiu Pavilion, a figure was tossing and turning, unable to sleep. For the fastest updated and error-free novel reading, please visit and bookmark this site to read the latest novels. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 217. King Kong entertained guests at Tianashanju, and the gathering of Princess Anyang and the ladies of the capital was also held at Tianashanju. In the afternoon, Tang Ning and Xiao I went there together. Tang Yao Yao had nothing to do, so she went to the bookstore to keep an eye on the printing progress. She was already a wealthy woman with a millionaire family, and she was still interested in making money. Based on Tang Ning's understanding of her, when would her wealth surpass that of her father? Maybe she would stop. Xiao family. Xiao Ju changed his clothes and walked out of the back hall. When he was about to go out, an old voice came from behind. "Where to?" Xiao Ju turned around and saw the old man sitting on the chair in the hall, and said, "I went to Tianashanju and made an appointment with some friends to have dinner together." The old man raised his head, looked at him, and asked, "Did Prince Kong make an appointment with you?" Xiao Ju looked at him and explained, "Just a casual meal. Every move you make represents the Xiao family." "You say you just want to eat casually," the old man said lightly, "do others think you just eat casually?" Xiao Ju opened his mouth, not knowing how to refute. After a long time, the old man's voice came again, "Since you have agreed, then go ahead. When doing things in the future, use your brain to think more and think more about the Xiao family." "I understand." Xiao Ju nodded and walked out of the room. He stood in the courtyard and breathed a long sigh of relief. The expression on his face was indescribable. The Xiao family was originally a descendant clan and was famous for a while. However, after the death of the queen and the premature death of the prince, the Xiao family became a declining aristocracy. The Xiao family, which is not in power, is not the target of King Kong and King Duan. It is wise to take good care of the family and not take sides. Taking a step forward means taking a stand. If by mistake, you stand in the wrong position, the Xiao family will no longer even be a fallen noble. He paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and strode out of Xiao's house. In Tianrunju, Zhao Yuner stood next to Zhong Yi, waved to Tang Ning, and said, "Young Master Tang, go and do your own work. If anyone finishes early, I will wait here." The place arranged by Princess Anyang was at the waterside pavilion in the middle of the lake. Tang Ning asked them to pay attention to safety and walked towards a small building ahead. He walked into the yard and saw a girl wearing a light yellow shirt, playing takraw ball in the yard. The takraw ball was under her feet, as if it was alive, and she was playing various tricks. Tang Ning walked over and asked, "Xiao Tao, is your lady here?" The girl was startled by him, her feet were unsteady, and the takraw ball fell to the ground. She picked up the sepak takraw ball, glared at Tang Ning, and said, "My lady is sleeping. If you have anything else to do, wait until she wakes up." It was just afternoon, and it was still early before dark. However, Tang Ning knew that Su Mei did not rest regularly. It was very rare for her to fall asleep no matter when. It was still a while before King Kang's banquet started. Since she was resting in her room, Tang Ning didn't bother her. He glanced at the still angry maid and walked out of the courtyard. A door in the courtyard suddenly opened, and a figure walked out and asked, "Xiao Tao, who are you talking to?" Su Mei looked a little tired. She stayed up all night last night and only slept for a short time in the early morning. At this moment, she was a little tired. She was lying on the bed, in a state of sleep, when she heard voices coming from outside. "Can't sleep anymore." Xiao Tao glared at Tang Ning and said dissatisfied, "It's all your fault for waking up the lady." Su Mei looked at the door of the courtyard, she couldn't help but be startled, wiped her eyes in disbelief, and asked with unconcealable joy on her face, "Why are you here?" "I come." As soon as Tang Ning opened his mouth, she walked over quickly, grabbed his arm, and said, "Come in." Snapped. The door was slammed shut, and the maid named Xiao Tao trembled, her mouth opened wide, and the takraw ball in her hand fell to the ground. Tang Ning knew that this was Su Mei's residence, but this was the first time she entered her room. Tang Ning had been in many girls' boudoirs, including Xiao Ru's, Xiao Yi's, Qing Er's, and Tang Yao Yao's. This was the first time she had seen one as messy as Su Mei. Countless papers were piled up scatteredly on the desk, and many even fell to the ground. The bed was even more messy, and the quilt was not folded. Tang Ning immediately saw the pink belly band worn by Xiao. All kinds of evidence proved that Xiao Tao was a lazy maid. Far worse than Qing Er. Wait a minute, she was sleeping just now. She didn't know how she slept. In her own room, she wouldn't sleep without clothes like she did a few nights ago. It was very possible to take off her belly band, so she is now. Once this thought arose, he could no longer suppress it. He pinched his thigh hard and looked away. Su Mei looked at him and asked doubtfully, "Why don't you look at me?" Tang Ning looked out the window, took out a sachet from her arms, and said, "I put some soothing herbs in it. You can try it and see if it works." Su Mei sighed and said, "I have tried many medicinal herbs to soothe the nerves, but they are of no use." Tang Ning put away the sachet and said, "Forget it." Su Mei grabbed the sachet from his hand and said, "How can you take back something that was given to others? You can rest, I'm going out." Tang Ning turned towards the door and walked out. "Stop," Su Mei pulled him to sit down beside him, wrapped herself tightly in the quilt, and said, "Just sit here, no soothing medicine will be useful to you." She wrapped herself in the quilt, and Tang Ning finally dared to look down at him. Su Mei lay on the bed, put the sachet in her mouth, looked up at him, and suddenly said, "From this direction, it seems that your face is really big." Tang Ning looked at the files and papers piled on the table beside him and said, "People have limited energy. You overconsume your energy every day, so your sleep is naturally not good. Life is in the world, and you can't help it." Su Mei sighed and changed the subject, "What are you doing here?" "King Kong invited me to a banquet. I thought you came to see me, so sad." "I can't sleep here, why don't you go to Hongxiu Pavilion to sleep?" "If you leave, Hongxiu Pavilion won't sleep either." "Why do you have such a strange insomnia, Tang Ning thought for a while, muttered to himself, but didn't get any response. He lowered his head and saw that Su Mei's eyes were closed, her expression was calm, and her usual charm from the inside out had disappeared, replaced by a kind of girlish purity. Tang Ning slowly got up and walked out the door lightly. I originally wanted her to look after Xiaoai, but I don't know how long she will sleep. Thinking carefully, nothing serious will happen at a gathering of girls, so let her have a good rest. Xiao Tao saw that he was the only one out, and asked vigilantly, "Where is our young lady? What did you do to our young lady?" "Shh. Tang Ning raised a finger and said, "She is asleep, please keep your voice down." Xiao Tao looked at him suspiciously, and carefully pushed the door and walked into the room. Seeing the young lady sleeping on the bed, her little face showed disbelief, and she quietly retreated. There was no one in the yard. "Where have you been?" Tang Ning walked out of Su Mei's residence, and suddenly heard a familiar voice. Xiaoju came from behind, looked at the courtyard, and said in surprise, "Isn't this Miss Su's residence? You don't even miss this little time." Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Why are you here? Didn't you say you couldn't come?" Xiaoju looked at him and said, "I believe in your vision." Tianrunju, main building, Tianzi number 1 Yeg. A young man looked at King Kong and asked in confusion, "Are you still waiting for someone?" King Kong smiled and said, "Don't worry, there are still 2 distinguished guests who haven't come yet." The man was confused, wondering who the 2 distinguished guests King Kong mentioned were, and why he made King Kong wait here, and King Kong didn't seem to care about it at all. While he was puzzled, the door of the Yeg was pushed open, and King Kong looked at the 2 people who came in and smiled, "You 2 are finally here. Fortunate young gentlemen." Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 218. As King Kong stood up, everyone in the elegant pavilion also stood up and looked over. They were very curious about the person who could make His Royal Highness King Kong wait. Among the 2 people who pushed the door open, the one on the left was familiar to everyone. Xiaoju, the young master, was already a celebrity in the capital before this imperial examination. The story of Xiaoju going to a brothel was known to everyone in the capital. But what really made him famous was another thing. Xiaoju was born in a general family and was a famous playboy in the capital. He actually won the first place in this palace examination. This has never happened since the founding of the state of Chen. Because of this, he became a captain of the Yulin army in one fell swoop. Even Lu Tang, who was known as the most promising son of a general family, could not compare with him. Everyone present was from a powerful family in the capital. These days, they were often compared with Xiaoju by their elders. Hearing his name, their ears have long been calloused. It's just that the Xiao family used to be low-key and never involved in party disputes. I wonder if the participation of the young master Xiao in the banquet of King Kong indicates something. These thoughts flashed through everyone's mind, and soon they turned their attention to another person. This person is as young as Xiaoju, but looks very unfamiliar and has never been seen before. Only a few people showed a look of realization on their faces. Tang Ning pushed the door open, bowed to King Kong, and said, "Something delayed me on the way, I hope your highness will not blame me." "Why would you blame me?" King Kong smiled and said, "What's more, the agreed time has not arrived, we came too early." He looked at Tang Ning, turned to the crowd, and said, "Let me introduce you to everyone, this is the top scorer of this palace examination, Tang Ning. My father has appointed him as the Hanlin editor, and from now on, everyone will call him Lord Tang." After King Kong introduced, everyone suddenly realized. Although they had never seen this top scorer, everyone had heard of his name. The number 1 in the palace examination is produced every 3 years, which is not rare. The people present may not take it seriously, but this year's number 1 is different from previous years. The most different thing is his identity. He was abandoned by the Tang family more than 10 years ago. Now he has jumped into the Dragon Gate and won the number 1 in the imperial examination. He has also cut off his relationship with the Tang family, which is jaw-dropping. The Tang family is a wealthy family in Beijing and the largest force in the hands of Prince Duan, who is hostile to Prince Kong. The actions of the Tang family more than 10 years ago directly pushed this number 1 to Prince Kong. And this one did not disappoint His Royal Highness Prince Kong. The case some time ago not only severely lost the face of the Tang family and Prince Duan, but also indirectly affected the situation of confrontation between Prince Kong and Prince Duan, making Prince Duan pay the price of a minister of the Ministry of Revenue. This is a rare victory for His Royal Highness Prince Kong in the confrontation with Prince Duan. The new number 1 Tang Ning is the source of this matter. King Kong raised his wine glass and said with a smile, "Tonight, I want to introduce Lord Tang to you all. Let's not talk about trivial matters and have a good time. Come on, Lord Tang, I'll toast you a glass." "I'll toast Lord Tang a glass too. You have so many people, aren't you bullying me?" "Lord Tang, ignore them, just show your respect." King Kong held a banquet for Tang Ning, so he naturally treated him as one of his own. Everyone was enthusiastic about him. Tang Ning also did not show any resistance. Judging from the current situation, the emperor would be either Prince Duan or Prince Kong, and it would not be the turn of the fat little Prince Run. In this way, he had only one choice. Although they lost a minister of the Ministry of Revenue this time, the Tang family has a strong foundation in the court and cannot shake them at all. There is no way. The Tang family has controlled the imperial examination for many years and has a great influence in the official circles. How many officials in the court entered the officialdom through the imperial examination? Who knows how much they have accumulated over the years? If your highness can win the hearts of scholars in the world, great things can be accomplished. It's easy to say, but how can the officials be loyal without reason? Although Prince Kong made it clear at the beginning that he would not talk about trivial matters today, after everyone drank a few glasses of wine, the topic naturally could not be separated from the dispute between the two princes. The supporters of Prince Kong and Prince Duan are obviously two camps. Prince Duan cannot compete with the real dignitaries in the capital. Prince Kong has limited influence in the civil service system, and has no prestige and achievements in the official circles. The two people have been fighting back and forth, and this has not changed much. King Kong drank a cup of wine and sighed, "How easy is it to get the support of those scholars?" Tang Ning thought for a moment, put down the wine glass, and said, "Your Highness, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Nothing can be accomplished overnight. If you want to win the hearts of the officials, you might as well get the support of some people first." Xiaoju had just picked up a bite of food, but the chopsticks shook and fell down again. Based on his understanding of Tang Ning, he would not do anything that was not good for him, and he would not be so kind as to give advice to King Kong, who was not related to him. King Kong was stunned, looked at Tang Ning, and said, "I would like to hear your opinion." "It's not a great opinion, just some superficial opinions." Tang Ning looked at King Kong and asked, "I wonder if your highness knows that since the imperial examination is a way to bring honor to the family and make a breakthrough, everyone should yearn for it. Why are there so few scholars in the world?" King Kong thought for a while and said, "The champion was once a poor student, so he must know this reason. Although reading is good, not everyone can afford to read this book." "Exactly." Tang Ning nodded and said, "Not to mention that the children of the poor cannot afford to pay a salary or buy a book. Even among the many scholars in the world, most of them are short of money and cannot afford to buy a book with commentaries on the meaning of the scriptures." "What's the use of saying this?" King Kong shook his head and said, "I can neither help them buy books nor lower the price of books." Tang Ning looked at him and said patiently, "As far as I know, many famous scholars in the world spent their whole lives writing books and biographies, but they themselves were poor. Many students spent a lot of money to buy books, but only handed over their money to pirated books. They have forced the genuine bookstores to have no way of survival, so they can only raise the price of books. As a result, no one can afford them. King Kong was confused when he heard this and said, "If Mr. Tang has anything to say, just say it directly." Tang Ning looked at him and said, "Your Highness can urge the court to legislate and severely crack down on pirated booksellers. In this way, genuine bookstores will not be forced to raise book prices in order to survive. The price of books will be reduced. For scholars, of course it is a good thing, and those famous scholars who wrote books will not be impoverished, and they must be grateful to His Highness." King Kong was a little moved by what he said. He thought for a while, then shook his head and said, "Father said that governing a big country is like cooking small dishes. Laws and regulations cannot be changed at will. This matter is difficult." Tang Ning didn't expect that he would actually dig a hole for himself. After thinking about it, he added, "If the imperial court protects the original books, it also allows other booksellers to pay a certain fee to print authentic books, and part of the fees will be returned to the original booksellers, and the other part goes to the treasury." King Kong was startled, and then he slammed the table and said, "In this case, my father will definitely agree. My father likes silver the most." When he thought about it carefully, this move would not only gain the gratitude of the scholars, but also bring an income to the national treasury. I am afraid it would also please his father. Wouldn't this kill two birds with one stone? He looked at Tang Ning with a smile on his face, cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, Master Tang, for your guidance. If this matter can be accomplished, I will be very grateful to you." Tang Ning smiled and said, "Your Highness, you are welcome. As a scholar, I have long wanted to do something for the scholars in the world." King Kong smiled at each other and looked at Tang Ning with even more serious eyes. During the dinner, Tang Ning excused herself to relieve herself and walked out of the accord. Xiaoju followed him and asked, "What you just said can really lower the price of books. Why do you want to lower the price of books? Do you want to buy a lot of books?" Tang Ning didn't know that part of what she just said was nonsense, but if the imperial court really introduced copyright laws, the prices of books in their bookshop would be lowered, and they would make small profits but quick sales. It seems not. Xiaoju looked at him, shook his head, thought for a moment, and then said, "Is your family going to open a bookstore?" Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 219. Xiaoju suddenly became smarter, and Tang Ning found it difficult to adapt. As the saying goes, blocking someone's way of making money is like killing one's parents. Businessmen are seeking profit. They will kill anyone who wants to touch their interests. But in terms of desperate efforts, they definitely can't fight King Kong, and they don't dare to fight. King Kong's father is the emperor, and killing his father is rebellion. Those pirated booksellers are not so brave. Since ancient times, there have been many people who wrote books with a strong sense of copyright. With their own influence and power, they have prevented pirated booksellers from making mistakes. However, it is extremely rare for them to be enforced through national legislation. Due to limited knowledge, the ancients had no concept of this and would not have noticed it. However, once copyright law is established, it is still very useful in maintaining the order of publishing, and the country can also benefit from it, killing two birds with one stone. As for whether those genuine bookstores will lower their book prices after there are fewer pirated booksellers, if King Kong can't even do this well, he might as well stop competing with others for the position of emperor. This matter killed two birds with one stone for King Kong, and it also had two benefits for him. There are fewer pirated booksellers, and the genuine ones will naturally sell the most. And if they want the copyright, they can just spend money to buy it. A copy of The Palace of Eternal Life is divided into 20 volumes, and each volume has independent copyright, and the money will not be lost. Come on, if this keeps up, it won't be long before he can catch up to a fraction of Tang Yejing's net worth. Thinking of this, Tang Ning suddenly felt a little sad. He finally realized that Tang Yaoyao was not his money tree, but he was Tang Yaoyao's money tree. Not only was she using it for gambling, but she was also urging her to publish. Making money from him and still squeezing him like this is just like Tang Baby. He and Xiaoju took a breather outside before walking up with him again. King Kong frowned, as if he was thinking about something. When he saw Tang Ning coming in, he immediately said, "I just thought about it. I'm afraid it's not that easy to facilitate this matter." Tang Ning was speechless. After all he had said, Prince Kong still had concerns. Did he really want him to teach him step by step? He suppressed his emotions, smiled slightly, and said calmly, "I wonder if your highness has any concerns." King Kong looked at him and said, "Master Tang, you don't know. The publication of books has always been supervised by the Imperial College. The Imperial College offers wine to get close to Prince Duan. I really can't get involved. If they object, wouldn't it be wrong? It seems that I have gone too far. Wouldn't it be better if they objected?" Tang Ning looked at him and said helplessly, "The more they object, the more it will highlight His Highness's discernment and his willingness to do his best for students all over the world. With all the hard work, all the scholars in the world will be more grateful to His Highness." When King Kong heard this, he suddenly understood. He cupped his hands to Tang Ning and said, "My Lord Tang, I am enlightened. Tomorrow, the king will report to my father and elaborate on the benefits of this matter." Xiaoju shook his head and said, "Your Highness, don't be anxious." King Kong looked at him and asked, "Xiao, what else does Captain Xiao have to say?" Xiaoju was the son of Mr. Xiao, so he was of the same generation as his father. Every time King Kong saw him, he always felt a little weird. It seemed that no matter how he was called, he could only use official titles instead. "I don't have any high opinions, just some superficial opinions." Xiaoju looked at Prince Kong, thought for a moment, and said, "I think your highness does not need to rush to explain the benefits of this matter to His Majesty in detail. He only needs to list the terms Imperial College and Duan. If the king objects, let them object." When King Kong heard this, after thinking about it for a while, his eyes suddenly lit up. "What you mean is that when my father is about to be convinced by them, if you continue to explain the benefits, it will appear that they—" Xiaoju smiled and said, "Your Highness is wise." After all, he had many years of experience in fighting with King Duan. King Kong thought about it briefly and had already put together a plan. Most of his supporters in the court are powerful people, and they have always wanted to win the support of scholars. This is a breakthrough and an opportunity to not only defeat King Duan, but also to gain benefits for himself. This is he likes to do things that can yield huge rewards at almost no cost. He looked at Tang Ning and couldn't help but feel overjoyed. If he was by his side to make suggestions, wouldn't there be many more opportunities? The Tang family gave him a big gift this time. And he originally thought that Xiaoju's first-class ranking was due to luck, but now it seems that he also has bad intentions, strategy. It is really a matter of joy that he won all the first-class positions in this palace examination. He picked up the wine glass and said, "Come, I'll give you a drink." A natural residence, a waterside pavilion in the middle of the lake. There is a main building in the natural residence garden, and there are many water pavilions and pavilions in the middle of the lake. The environment is elegant, and it is a place where elegant guests from Beijing often come. But today, the waterside pavilion in the middle of the lake was sealed off, and outsiders, especially men, were not allowed to enter. In the promenade and pavilion on the lake, there are shadows, and laughter comes from time to time. If it weren't for the princess' invitation, my father wouldn't let me come out. I only do reading and embroidery every day at home. It's really boring. Sisters, have you read any good books recently? Since the publication of The Romance of the West Chamber and The Peony Pavilion, I haven't read anything in recent days. West Chamber has just been published, and there are already East Chamber, South Chamber and North Chamber on the market. Those people are so shameless, thinking that by choosing similar names, they can be compared with Mr. Li Cheng. The banquets held by Princess Anyang on weekdays don't actually need a name. The daughters of officials and rich people in the capital are usually quite restrained at home. Only at such times can they let themselves go. Therefore, Princess Anyang has a very good relationship with the ladies in the capital. The girls flirted with each other and talked about their private affairs. Suddenly, someone looked aside and asked, "Who is that over there? Why have I never seen her before?" Someone looked over and said, "I don't know her, but the one next to her seems to be Zhao Yun'er. She should be her friend." Zhongyi and Zhao Yun'er were sitting in a pavilion. Someone came over and looked at Zhongyi and asked Zhao Yun'er, "Yun'er, who is this sister? She looks a little unfamiliar." Zhao Yun'er looked back and said with a smile, "Her name is Zhongyi. She is the daughter of the Ping'an County magistrate. She has just come to the capital." The girl looked at Zhongyi and smiled, "Since she is Yun'er's friend, she is one of us. Let's get to know each other. My name is Shenro. I should be a little older than you. I will call you Sister Zhong from now on." The girls next to her also introduced themselves with a smile. Shenro looked at Zhongyi's hair bun, which was different from theirs, and asked in surprise, "Is Sister Zhong married?" Zhongyi smiled and nodded, saying, "She got married last year. I wonder which lucky guy can marry such a beautiful woman." Shenro looked at her and said with some sigh. Zhao Yun'er looked at her and teased, "Sister Ro, you should get married too, right? How is it? Haven't you found your ideal husband yet? There are so many young talents in the capital, but there is no one that Sister Ro likes." "Not that there is none." Shenro smiled and said, "That day I was sitting in front of the window on the second floor of my small pavilion at home, and I saw a young man riding a horse passing by the street. He was well-mannered and handsome." Zhao Yun'er asked with a gossipy look on her face, "Did you find out whose young man he is?" "I did find out." Shenro smiled and said, "I later found out that the number one scholar in this palace examination, I don't know if he is married or not, where he lives. If he is not married yet, I will ask my father to ask someone to propose marriage to him." "Propose marriage?" Zhao Yun'er covered her stomach, laughing so hard that her body shook. She pointed at Zhongyi and said, "Then you can't call her Sister Zhong, you have to call her sister." "Ah," Shenro was startled and asked, "What do you mean?" In another pavilion on the water, Princess Anyang looked at a figure walking over and said, "Why are you here just now? I have already invited the person you asked me to invite." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 220. Ah, Sister Zhong is the First Lady. When she said she wanted to marry the number one scholar in front of the First Lady, Shenro looked embarrassed, blushed, and said hurriedly, "I was just joking, Sister Zhong, don't mind." Zhongyi smiled and said, "It's okay." Shenro looked at her, and she no longer had any negative thoughts about the handsome young man riding a horse. She praised, "Sister Zhong and the number one scholar are really talented and good-looking, they are a perfect match." After the slight embarrassment just now, the atmosphere among the girls relaxed slightly. Suddenly someone looked to the other side of the corridor and said, "The princess is here." Everyone looked over and saw Princess Anyang walking over from a distance accompanied by a figure. "I have met the Princess." Shenro, Zhao Yun'er and others saluted. Princess Anyang smiled and said, "We are all sisters, no need to be polite." She looked at the girls, smiled and said, "Shui'er has something to say to Miss Zhong, why don't we go over and have a chat?" Shenro was startled when she heard this, then she smiled and said, "Okay." Princess Anyang walked out first, and Zhao Yuner and others looked at each other and walked out of the pavilion one after another. Zhonyi stood in the pavilion, looked at the woman opposite with some doubts, and asked, "Girl, do we know each other? What do you want to say to me?" "You don't know me, but I know you." The woman looked at her and smiled. "My name is Tang Shui, but you can't call me that, sister-in-law's Iao." This was not the first time Zhonyi heard Tang Shui's name, but it was the first time he saw her. She knew Tang Shui's identity, so her expression was slightly panicked and she seemed a little at a loss. Tang Shui looked at her, smiled and said, "Sit down. I've wanted to meet you for a long time, but I never had the chance." Tang Shui looked at her and said apologetically, "It's really presumptuous to ask Princess Anyang to hold a banquet here and invite you over this time." Zhonyi's lips parted slightly. She never thought that the party held by Princess Anyang today was actually for her. "My younger siblings are so beautiful. My cousin is always surrounded by..." She originally said that Tang Ning was always surrounded by beautiful women, but when she thought about the identity of the person opposite her, this sentence was very inappropriate and she changed her tune temporarily. Said, "My cousin is really lucky." The woman opposite her was at most 2 years older than her, but she spoke like an elder. Zhonyi's face turned slightly red and she said, "Sister, I'm sorry, sister." Tang Ning had explained the Tang family's affairs to her. Although she didn't have any particular fondness for Miss Tang Shui, whom she had only heard her name from, she didn't have any bad feelings either. Tang Shui looked at her with gentle eyes, which made Zhonyi blush slightly and lower his head in embarrassment. Tang Shui suddenly took off a jade bracelet from his wrist and said, "This is for you." Zhonyi looked at her and said in surprise, "This is..." Tang Shui explained, "My sister-in-law gave this to me before, and now I will give it to you. By the way, my sister-in-law is your mother." One thing she didn't say was that this bracelet was her sister-in-law's treasure and was originally intended to be passed on to the Tang family's daughter-in-law. For a long time, she thought that Tang Ning had died more than 10 years ago, so she gave the bracelet to her. This jade bracelet is crystal clear, with almost no trace of color. Zhonyi only took one look at it and knew that this jade bracelet was worth a lot of money. He hurriedly said, "No, this is too precious." Tang Shui grabbed her hand, put the jade bracelet on her, and said, "This was originally meant to be passed on to you, but now it can be considered as returning to its original owner." Zhonyi raised his head and wondered, "Sister?" Tang Shui held her hand and said, "Take it." Not far away, Zhao Yuner and Shenro were sitting in another pavilion, but they couldn't help but look at the adjacent pavilion not far away. Shenro pinched a piece of pastry and put it into her mouth, and murmured, "What can Miss Tang Shui say to Sister Zhong?" "I know," Zhao Yuner said with a look of surprise on her face, "it's not that Zhuang Yuanlang and the Tang family, after all, Zhonyi is his wife and Tang Shui is his sister, so naturally they have something to say." Shenro was startled, and suddenly said, "But I heard that the number one scholar and the Tang family don't get along." Zhao Yuner shook her head and said, "Who knows whether those things are true or false, false or true." In the pavilion, Zhonyi had a look of memory on his face and said, "When I first met my husband, it was actually a misunderstanding. At that time, he was hit and lost his memory. He even forgot his own name. Until now, my husband, there are still many things I haven't remembered." After listening to her words, Tang Shui felt slightly sad and asked, "What next?" "Then I took the state exam with the idea of giving it a try, but I won the Xie, and then I got to where I am now step by step." Tang Shui felt even more sad. Although Zhonyi said it in an understatement, how difficult is it for a child with no background and who grew up in a poor family to overcome obstacles all the way and win 3 yuan in a row? She couldn't tell her sister-in-law these things. Thinking of his experiences over the years, she couldn't help but feel sad. She looked at Zhonyi and said, "I'll excuse you for a while." Zhonyi nodded. Her mood was extremely complicated at the moment. She felt like an ugly daughter-in-law meeting her parents-in-law, and she wanted to be alone for a while. A little further away from the pavilion in the heart of the lake, the lights in the pavilions by the lake were reflected in the water, blown by the breeze, and shattered into pieces. Tang Shui leaned on the railing and looked, his eyes as blurry as the light and shadow in the water. Princess Anyang came over and stood beside her, looking at the sparkling water on the lake, and asked, "What's wrong?" Tang Shui wiped her eyes without leaving any trace, and said, "Thank you, Princess, for today. Is it necessary to be so polite between us sisters?" Princess Anyang shook her head and said, "It's too difficult for you to do this alone. Are you ready to stand opposite the Tang family? If it weren't for my aunt, I would have died outside 18 years ago." Tang Shui retracted her gaze from the lake and said, "My aunt has treated me like her own child over the years. How can I let her stay in that small courtyard all her life and die alone?" Princess Anyang sighed and stopped talking. Tang Shui looked at her and said, "I'll bother you again in a few days." Princess Anyang nodded and said, "If you have anything to say, just tell me. It will be more convenient for me to come forward." Shenro, who returned to the pavilion, looked at Zhongyi and said with some envy, "Sister Zhong, you have a really good vision. When you got married, your husband hadn't taken the imperial examination yet, right?" Zhongyi nodded, but she felt that this had nothing to do with her vision. If there was any good vision, it was Yao Yao's vision. "It's a pity that the next imperial examination will have to wait until 3 years later." Shenro shook her head and said with some regret, "I can't wait for 3 years. Otherwise, I will also find a talented man first, accompany him to study day and night, and when he wins the first place, I will be the wife of the first place." Zhao Yuner joked, "It's not too late for you to find one now, but the first place is rare, so you'd better forget it. Many of the new Jinchi this year are still unmarried. Do you want to try them?" As soon as she finished speaking, a voice came from outside the court. "Yes, Sister Ro, my Jun's Hung ranked second in the palace examination this time. Would you like him to introduce you to a fellow student? After all, Sister Ro is not young anymore. If she delays for another 2 years, it will be even more difficult for her to get married." The voice was 3 parts teasing and 3 parts weird. Shenro's face darkened immediately after hearing it. She usually didn't get along well with this girl. This time, her favorite person passed the imperial examination and was even more arrogant in front of her. She snorted coldly and said, "I won't bother you, Chen Miao, to worry about my marriage." The woman named Chen Miao smiled and said, "We are all sisters. Sister Ro, you don't have to be polite to me. My Jun's Hung knows many new Jinchi." Shenro glanced at her, looked at Zhongyi, and said, "What a coincidence. Sister Zhong's husband is also a Jinchi this year. He knows many of his peers. Miss Chen doesn't have to worry." Chen Miao looked at Zhongyi and said in surprise, "Is this lady's husband also a new Jinchi? I don't know what your husband's name is. If he ranks second, he may know my Jun's Hung." She deliberately emphasized the word second, and the pride on her face could not be concealed. There are 3 lists in the palace examination, and the list is 1 level apart. The second and third seem to be only 1 word apart, but they are worlds apart. Zhongyi smiled slightly and said, "My husband doesn't have many friends today. I haven't heard him mention this name. I guess he doesn't know him." Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 221. After Zhongyi finished speaking, the smile on Chen Miao's face became even brighter. Zhou Jun's Hung is ranked second. Although he is ranked behind the second, there are only 30 people in the second. After going through the provincial examination, the palace examination, and the Qianglan banquet, the second-level scholars do not know each other, but their names should be known. I have heard it before, even the most stupid person should know that for the sake of future and development, it is necessary to make more friends. She subconsciously regarded the husband of the woman in front of her as a top-notch jinchi, and even her chest couldn't help but puff up a little. She looked at Zhongyi and said with a smile, I'm a jinchi in the same year, so I still need to move around more. My Junsheng has a lot of friends. If you have the opportunity, you might as well get to know each other so that we can help each other in the future. Shenro couldn't stand Chen Miao's look the most. She rolled her eyes, looked at Zhongyi, and asked with a smile, Sister Zhong, who do your husband and wife associate with every day? They must all be great talents, right? I don't know either. Zhongyi shook his head and said, I think there are very few friends that I hang out with every day. Apart from Xiao Ju and Mr. Xiao, there are only Mr. Gu Bai, Mr. Kui Langqui, and Mr. Shen. I don't know what his name is. Chen Miao was stunned when she heard this, and asked subconsciously, Shen Jian. Zhongyi thought for a while, nodded and said, it seems to be called Shen Jian. Chen Miao looked at her. Xiaoju was in the first class of the imperial examination. Gu Bai, Kui Lang, and Shen Jian were the top 3 in the second class. Anyone who could associate with them would not be some unknown person, even Zhou Junsheng. I dare not say that I am friends with these people. There must be a limit to bragging. Why didn't she say that her husband-in-law also knew Tang Ning, the new top scorer? Chen Miao looked at Zhongyi and couldn't help laughing, and asked with a hint of mockery, Ms. Zhong's husband-in-law, isn't he the #1 scholar? Oh, you really guessed it. Shenro looked at Chen Miao and said with a smile, if I remember correctly, your Zhou Junsheng seems to be a scholar of the Hanlin Academy, and Sister Zhong's husband is a Hanlin scholar. Xiaozan, we are all in the Hanlin Academy, we will meet each other without looking up, we will definitely get to know each other in the future, you don't have to worry. The smile on Chen Miao's face froze, and she did not dare to leave the passage. Are you, the #1 scholar, your husband-in-law? She actually believed it in her heart. It was a matter of reputation, and no woman would joke about such a thing, but she didn't want to believe it. If her husband was the new champion, wouldn't Chen Miao's behavior just now be a clown? Zhongyi smiled lightly and said, my husband said, this is just His Majesty's love. Shenro said with a smile, Sister Zhong is so humble. She has won 3 yuan in a row. It is not only because of His Majesty's grace. The #1 scholar deserves to be the #1 scholar. He is the top scholar in high school, but he is still so humble. It's not like some people who are worthy of being on the top Ergia, his tail is raised to the sky. Chen Miao knew who she was talking about, her face turned red and white, and she couldn't stay here any longer. She whispered excuse me and left in a hurry. But you are so sullen. Shenro looked at Chen Miao's escaping figure and said, Sister Zhong, you don't know how proud Chen Miao is on weekdays, but she is just at the bottom of the second-class rankings. I can't wait to have the list engraved on her face. Zhongyi smiled slightly and said nothing. Shenro held her hand enthusiastically and said, Sister Zhong, you have just arrived in the capital not long ago. I will take you to get to know a few more sisters. From now on, we will have to walk around each other. By the way, do you recognize the #1 scholar? Young talented people should be good-looking, preferably taller and fairer. On the corridor between the water pavilions in the center of the lake, Shenro looked at Zhongyi and murmured, Sister Zhong, tell me why you have such good eyesight. I'm so jealous. Zhongyi said with some embarrassment, actually, when I got married, I threw embroidered balls. Ah, Shenro's expression was obviously startled. Looking at her expression, she became even more envious. You can also throw a hydrangea and get the top pick. How lucky must you be? Suddenly there was a call from the front. Shenro held Zhongyi in her arms, looked up and said, come on, let's go take a look. Princess Anyang's friends are all the famous ladies of the capital, and the gatherings on weekdays are naturally not just about eating and drinking. Although they are not proficient in all of these noble ladies in the capital, they are not proficient in chess, calligraphy, painting, poetry, books, and articles. There are also a very small number of people who are extremely talented and as talented as men. Their talents in the capital are far and wide, making many men admire them. They usually stay at home and cannot express their love for each other. After getting together, they occasionally take out their works and discuss them with others, or share what books they have read recently and recommend each other. And so on. At this moment, more than 10 women gathered together and passed several pieces of paper with poems on them to each other. No wonder I haven't seen you, little girl, for so long. It turns out that you are hiding at home and studying poetry. Fortunately, Xiao Xiao and the others are girls. If they were boys, what would happen to those stinky men in the imperial examination? Meow meow, I'm afraid your Zhou Junzheng didn't help you refine this poem. It looks like his style. If you are envious, find someone to help you think about it. Chen Miao gently pushed the woman who was speaking, and said with a smile, I didn't let him go, but he insisted on helping me change it, and there was nothing I could do. What a beautiful poem, but he changed it into something so different. The woman said, how can there be a 4-in-1? Zhou Junzheng is good at poetry. This poem is well revised. However, we women can never compare to those men in poetry. Your Zhou Junzheng helps you. Who can compare to you? You are cheating. That's not necessarily true. Chen Miao glanced at the crowd and looked at Zhong Yi, who just walked over. She smiled and said, Miss Zhong is the wife of the champion. The champion has outstanding literary talent. I believe Miss Zhong's literary talent is not bad either. I can't compare with her. The wife of the champion. Hearing this, the women turned their heads and looked over. The champion of this imperial examination is amazing. There are not many people who have won the top 3 prizes in history. They are familiar with the name and deeds of this champion, but it is the first time they have seen the wife of the champion. Shenro looked at Chen Miao with an ugly face. This woman was obviously deliberately taking revenge for the loss of face she had just suffered. While everyone was looking at Zhong Yi, Chen Miao had already stepped forward and asked with a smile, everyone knows that the champion is good at poetry. Miss Zhong has been with him day and night, so I guess his attainments in poetry are not bad. I wonder if Miss Zhong can take out 1 or 2 old works for us to see. Zhong Yi looked at her and smiled, I just know a little bit. I won't show it to you for fun. Miss Zhong is too modest. Chen Miao looked at everyone with a smile on her face and said, everyone's poems are also for fun. We are just exchanging ideas with each other, not participating in the imperial examination. Why should the wife of the champion refuse? Yes, yes, the champion is so famous for his poems, and the wife of the champion must be good too. It's just an old work. The wife of the champion doesn't have to be modest to refuse. The women were full of curiosity about the wife of the champion who they met for the first time, and many of them agreed with Chen Miao. Tang Shui stood outside the crowd with a frown on her face. Just as she was about to walk in, a white hand was placed on her shoulder. A figure walked out from behind Tang Shui, looked at Zhong Yi, and said with a smile, how about Mumu and Xiao Xiao, change but, year after year, I heard that Ling's whose first talented woman came to the capital, and today I finally saw her. At this time, the sky had darkened, but when the woman walked out of the crowd, the women felt as if the whole waterside pavilion was bright for a moment. As women, when they saw her, they couldn't help but feel ashamed. Sume is Sume. At any time, any place, as long as she is there, everyone will become a foil. Then, they realized what she said. How about Mumu and Xiao Xiao, change but, year after year, this Magpie Bridge ferry was spread to the capital after the Kixi festival last year. It is said that it was written by a talented woman in Lingzhou, and it set off a wave in the poetry circle of the capital at that time. Although that talented woman was far away in Lingzhou, her many poems had long been spread to the capital. The Magpie Bridge Ferry that amazed countless people was not her best work. After reading her poems, many people in the capital thought that calling her the first talented woman in Lingzhou was far from enough. With her poetry attainments, no woman in Chen State could surpass her. The word Lingzhou in the first talented woman in Lingzhou could be completely erased. That talented woman's name was Zhong Yi. Zhong Yi, Miss Zhong, including Shen Rou and others who showed a look of realization on their faces. All the women looked at the figure opposite Chen Miao.